welcome back to Cinema Wellman. I'm your host, David, and today we're going to break down the top 10 and the bottom 5 of the films screened here at Cinema Wellman for the month of November. Pretty lean month for Cinema Wellman. 56 films screened, and that's because there was a lot of World Cup soccer that was being watched, taking up a lot of time. Speaking of World Cup soccer, little teaser here, there's going to be a special episode coming up for you on Sunday morning that you can watch or listen to before the World Cup final, and it is going to be the World Cup of Cinema. We've taken the entire bracket and we have broken it down and we've advanced it all the way through to a conclusion. We're going to crown our own World Cup cinematic champion right here on Sunday morning, so look forward to that. But first, we have November. We have the top 10. We have the bottom 5. We have zero regrets. Not even the Acorn Heights double feature that ended the month, which, unfortunately, I'm not going to talk about that at all, but it was quite a trip. Acorns and The Nut Job. That's my girls. That's what we watched. But let's begin where we usually do, and that's at the bottom. We're going to begin with number 5. From 1986, it is Deadly Friend, and it's always a red flag when the poster wants to tell you about something else that the filmmakers or the director is famous for. Hey, remember when Wes Craven made good movies like Last House on the Left and Nightmare on Elm Street? Well, he also made this, okay? Deadly Friend features pre-Buffy Christy Swanson and post-Little House on the Prairie Matthew Laboratow. It's kind of a Reanimator-type horror sci-fi movie that is really not worth the 91-minute runtime. Here's from IMDb. After his friend is killed by her abusive father, what is this, Disney? The new kid in town attempts to save her by implanting a robotic microchip into her brain. What could go wrong? A lot. Quite a bit. Quite a lot. Next, number 4 of the bottom 5 is from 1976, and it's Obsession. So, take a close look at that poster. Look at how many words are on that poster. There are over 200 words on that poster. I know because I counted them. When I was teaching, I read shorter essays than that poster. The poster's an abomination, and it repeats itself all over the place. Included on it, Gene Shalit's review is just like Eugene Levy used to do his impersonation of Gene Shalit on SCTV. Go see Sea of Love. See Sea of Love. I loved it. It's just garbage. And you know what? Go straight to hell, Rex Reed, for even suggesting that this crap is, quote, as good and often better than anything Hitchcock has ever done, end quote. What did you just say, Rex Reed? Which Hitchcock are we talking about? NHL coach Ken Hitchcock? Russell Hitchcock, the vocalist from Air Supply? English singer-songwriter Robin Hitchcock? You cannot be referring to acclaimed film director Sir Alfred Hitchcock. You know more about film than to make that stupid comment, I think. Next, number 3 in the bottom 5 from 1992, Mr. Saturday Night. If you dislike Billy Crystal like I do, that should be on the poster. This movie is a nightmare. It's absolutely everything annoying about Billy Crystal crammed into an unfunny, washed-up, Borscht Belt comedian named Buddy Young. He's obnoxious to his friends and his family, and his act is atrocious. This is 2 hours of Billy Crystal directing Billy Crystal as a crap comedian. I wish I stocked up on fresh produce to hurl at the screen like people did in the old days. They threw produce in the Catskills. I think they did, but we can Google that. If not for David Paymer's Best Supporting Actor nomination, and he was very good, I would have steered clear to this by a wide margin. So that was terrible. Number 2 in the bottom 5 is from this year, 2022, and it's The Munsters. So do you remember the old TV show? It was from the mid-'60s. also titled The Munsters. Ran for 3 seasons, made a mark, kind of a small mark on the TV landscape due to memorable characters, and it's really the people who play them. Fred Gwynne as Herman and Al Lewis as Grandpa, shares my birthday, Grandpa Al Lewis, and Yvonne DiCarlo was Lily Munster. Nice little piece of TV history that, in my opinion, should have just been left alone. For some reason, Rob Zombie resurrected it and turned it into a very colorful, visually, it's very interesting visually and it's colorful, but ultimately it's a super weak reboot. When I watched it, I couldn't help thinking about the show and that it was exactly like watching an episode of the old show. And then I thought maybe that's because the show wasn't that interesting either. See this only if you're a huge fan of the original series, and if not, you can just skip it, and you're welcome. And number 1, the worst film screened here at Cinema Wellman in the month of November was from 1978. So this came out while I was in high school, and this film was kind of like the unicorn of films. No one could find it. You couldn't really rent it. No theater had it. It was like this underground thing. And I finally saw it, and it was really much ado about nothing. And it's called Faces of Death. The poster reads, "Warning, this feature contains graphic depictions of autopsies, dismemberment, physical cruelty, human combustion, and electrocution. It should not be viewed by children, the elderly, or the squeamish." So poster, no notes. But the film is just garbage. It's horrific nonsense just from the start to the finish. It's supposedly a shockumentary that is, found footage of all sorts of nastiness, like the poster reads, autopsies, an electrocution that they faked. And that's what I was going to talk about. A lot of this, it turns out, was faked. The most infamous scene in the film, I believe, supposedly takes place at a restaurant where a couple, 2 men and 2 women, sit down at a table at this fancy restaurant, and they bring in a live monkey and they open up the table and they shut the table so that just the monkey's head is sitting out above the table and the monkey's body's under the table. And then the waiter comes around with a tray of implements, including a hammer and like saws and stuff like that. And you see where this is going. So they bust into the monkey's head and expose the skull, and they're sitting there eating the brains. It was all fake. It was still disturbing to watch it being faked. But it was cauliflower. The brains were cauliflower and the blood was stage blood. Most of the stuff being fake didn't make it any easier for me to watch. And I was chasing the film for decades, and when I finally saw it, it was just like, this is junk. All right, but that's it. Not every film can have fake monkey brains being eaten by a dinner party. So let's now take a look at 10 films from November that were screened that were actually good and don't feature monkey brains in any way, shape, or form. I'm just going through the list again. Monkey brains, no monkey brain free zone heading out now. Starting with number 10 from 2022, the DC League of Super Pets. Believe it or not, no surprise that a movie featuring Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Kevin Hart makes the top 10. I've made it clear that I enjoy both of them, and I'll watch just about anything that they're in. And with The Rock, that's so true. I even watched San Andreas. I thought this was a cute animated adventure about the pets of superheroes, and it's kind of cool to think about them as having pets because some of them are human, some of them are in human form. I don't even want to get into that, but they have pets. The cast, other than Johnson and Kevin Hart, is really good. We've got Kate McKinnon, Vanessa Bayer, Natasha Lyonne, Ben Schwartz, Diego Luna. Mark Maron is Lex Luthor. John Krasinski's Superman. Keanu Reeves is here as Batman. They always seem to get really good casts together for these animated adventures. I guess because easy to make because the people don't even have to be in the same state or country while they're recording all this stuff. In any event, the story follows Crypto, the super dog, as he enlists the help of other assorted super pets when Superman is kidnapped. Again, a fun animated action movie, certainly worth a look, especially if you're into the DC comic book universe. And at the closing credits, they have one of those interesting credits at the end. They listed all the pets of the cast and crew, kind of like you see that sometimes with longer productions. Here are all the babies that were born during the production of this movie. I always like stuff like that. All right, here we go. Number 9 on the top 10 list is a short, and the short is titled Suicide by Sunlight, and it's from 2019. And it is 17 minutes long, and it's about a character named Valentina. And Valentina is a black vampire, and she is protected from the sun and, combusting in the sunlight by the melanin in her skin. So she can walk around by day, as can other black vampires. Now, it's a future that people are aware that there are vampires everywhere. And since it's only 17 minutes, they don't really go into that too much. But they do make that clear, that it's not out of the ordinary that there are vampires. Valentina, is estranged from her husband and twin daughters, who have welcomed a new woman into their lives. This is moody and it's atmospheric, and it's going to keep you guessing until the very end. And the final line is extremely creepy. And don't forget the rule about vampires. Remember that you have to invite them in, and that's kind of key. Which brings us to number 8, totally unrelated, from 1979, a documentary titled Best Boy. And Best Boy is an Oscar-winning documentary about 3 years in the life of Philip "Philly" Wall, an intellectually disabled 52-year-old man who's preparing for a self-reliant future. It was made by his cousin Ira, and it documents Philly getting used to the idea that he is going to have to move on after his elderly parents are no longer able to care for him. I thought this was sweet. The subject matter is dealt with in a very caring and loving way. Obviously made by his cousin, and that shows through. The family vibe is all there, and Philly's an absolute delight. And even though it was made 43 years ago and some of the vocabulary used to describe people like Philly has changed, I still think this would be it's a good film. It's a nice film to show younger people that might be curious or might have a classmate who's also intellectually disabled, and it deals with them in a very positive way. And I'm pleased to report that even though this was made in 1979 and it was about Philly at 52, kind of moving out and being on his own, he did just that. And he did that for another 40 years. Philly passed away in 2020 at the age of 92. So it's a tremendous story. It's a sweet story. And again, Philly, he's a delight. Bless you, Philly. Number 7 from 2001, Winged Migration, or is it Winged? Winged. I think I've heard it pronounced winged. I like winged. Winged Migration in any event. Here we go. Birds, all kinds of birds. Now, I have to admit that I'm kind of a bird snob. I really like the birds of prey. I wish I had a falcon and the nice glove that the falcon sits on. I like eagles and falcons and hawks and stuff like that. The birds that really annoy me are the ones that wake me up when I'm trying to sleep. Now, watching this documentary changed some of that, and kind of now I'm more on Team Bird. New appreciation for the entire group. It was shot over a 3-year period on all 7 continents, and it tells amazing stories about the migratory patterns of different types of birds. Fascinating statistical kind of stuff. Miles traveled and how long it takes and where and how often it happens and all this stuff. It's really amazing. And I'm a believer. We've done our best to try to destroy our planet, and kind of because we take it for granted. But sometimes I think it takes one of these breathtakingly visual nature documentaries to kind of like slap us in the face and say, look where you live. I mean, just check this out and look at the animals and the plants and the everything, and why can't we live in a really good ecosystem that we can all survive and share the space? But you know how that goes. Let's move on to number 6. Number 6 is an oldie from 1943. Not as old as number 5. But number 6 is Phantom of the Opera, one of the versions of Phantom of the Opera, because there are many. And this one stars Claude Rains, and I'm a big fan of Claude Rains, so I was surprised that I had never seen this one before. And again, this is Phantom of the Opera, the classic tale of unrequited love. And this 1943 version won 2 Oscars. It won an Oscar for cinematography, color, when they used to separate the awards into color film and black and white films. They did that for, I think, costume design and art direction and things like that, cinematography. So Phantom of the Opera won for cinematography, color, and art direction, interior decoration, color, and both were well-deserved. Visually impressive, this musical with this really dark center. And I was discussing this at Thanksgiving with a couple of big-time Phantom of the Opera fans, and I was impressed with the special effects of this, especially the chandelier coming down from the rafters into the audience, into the crowds. Extremely well done for the 40s. Actually, just stunning. Just fantastic. I also watched the 2004 version, I think the day after I watched this one. It's also good. I mean, sometimes that happens. It's a good story, so they make good versions of it. A Star is Born is a good example of that. Next, here we go. Number 5 on our list of top 10 for the month of November is from 1919, and it's a documentary, and it's titled South. And South is about Sir Ernest Shackleton and his crew aboard the Endurance. Now, I've read several books on this topic. I've seen more than a few documentaries about Shackleton and his crew and the Endurance, including one IMAX presentation that made me nauseous. In any event, what makes South stand out is that it was made in 1919, just 3 years after the expedition concluded, and it's a silent movie that was shot by film. The film was shot by crew member Frank Hurley, and he documents this entire experience. Let me read a little bit from IMDb just so you get the historical background. The story of the 1914 to 1916 Antarctic exploration mission of Sir Ernest Shackleton. The ship sails south, breaking the ice and ultimately getting trapped by the fast-changing weather. The ship breaks up in the ice, and while 22 men and 70 dogs wait on Elephant Island, Shackleton and a crew of 5 take a 20-foot lifeboat 800 miles to South Georgia Island to mount a rescue mission. I still think this is one of the most amazing tales of courage and survival ever. Shackleton takes these 5 men on this little boat, and they travel 800 miles. It takes them 17 days through the open ocean, the icy ocean waters, and they get there, and their first thing is, let's go back and get the rest of the crew. When they came back, 4 months later, every member of that crew was like, oh, there's Shackleton. We knew he'd come back. Never a question. That's what a great leader he was. They had total confidence in him that he took off in that boat with those guys that time ago. He'll be back. It's fantastic. I'm still waiting for someone to give this the blockbuster film treatment it deserves. I'm not sure why it hasn't been done yet. It's an amazing, amazing story. Number 4 on the list for November is a documentary, and it is Eyes on the Prize from 1987. So Eyes on the Prize was a 6-hour, very comprehensive documentary about the American Civil Rights Movement from 1952 to 1965. It was a TV series on PBS. Now, why was it in my radar for movies that I watch if it was a TV series? Well, one episode of this, the episode Bridge to Freedom 1965, got nominated for a Best Documentary Feature Oscar. So I decided to watch all 6 hours because I had never seen it, and I'm very glad that I did. I taught about the American Civil Rights Movement quite a few times while I was teaching. So a lot of this stuff was not new to me. I was aware of just about, I would say, 80, 85%, 90% of the material that they presented, but that didn't make this any less powerful. This should be required viewing for all school children in this country, along with the 2016 documentary 13th. Now, I know that'll never happen because too many politicians and school boards in this country are gutless and they are afraid to deal with issues such as the racism that unfortunately this country was partially built on. There's not enough study about this. There's not enough study about the Holocaust, and that's why we still see bigotry and racism. It's one of the reasons why it continues. And children in our country deserve to know the truth about our racist past. And hiding it from them doesn't do anybody any good. Educate them about it, and maybe we can do something about eliminating it. I mean, it's terrible. This was a great series, a great documentary, and I recommend it very highly, along with 13th, which is probably in the top 5 documentaries that I've ever seen. All right, let's go on lighter notes here now. Okay, let's go. Number 3 is See How They Run, and it's from 2022. Now, Knives Out came out a few years ago, 2019. I loved Knives Out, and I'm eagerly awaiting the sequel, Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery. That's coming out next week, I believe. And with that sequel and the release of this film, See How They Run, I'm hoping that there's like this resurgence in the whole murder mystery whodunit genre, because they're great fun. There's nothing better than a good murder mystery with a big cast of people that you know, and some of them are allowed to chew up the scenery. This was once a popular genre in cinema. If you go back to the 40s and the 50s, lots of Agatha Christie. They probably made a film. Talk about Stephen King stories being made into movies. They probably did as many with Agatha Christie stories. But the murder mystery seemed to have grown out of favor before Knives Out came out, possibly because you need a very well-written script and a good story to pull it off correctly. And you've heard me say this before, original ideas, that's not Hollywood's forte. See How They Run features 2 of my favorite actors, Sam Rockwell and Saoirse Ronan. They lead a stellar cast. Adrian Brody is wonderful. He should only play characters like he plays in this and in the Wes Anderson movies, and I'll be happy for the rest of my days. It's a fun comedy mystery, and it's set in the 50s in London's West End. The story involves plans for a movie version of a smash hit play that gets derailed when a key member of the crew is murdered. And I love the whole movie within a movie angle, and that's possibly an upcoming episode. Rockwell and Ronan have great chemistry together, and if this is well received and makes money, we may see a sequel in the future. And I'm not usually big on sequels, but this would be a delightful sequel to see coming down the road. Here we go. We got number 2 from 1950. It is titled Mr. 880. And I mentioned earlier that one of the signs, if I really like a movie, it's how much I talk about it, and I keep talking about it, and how many people I mention that, I saw this movie the other day. And a lot of times I tend to not shut up about it, but you might be familiar with that. I watched this on the Monday after Thanksgiving while I was still visiting family, so anybody I could pin down and talk about Mr. 882, they heard about this. So Mr. 880 is based on the true story of a junkman counterfeiter whose bill of choice to counterfeit was the $1 bill. He only did it to make ends meet. It was never his intention to deceive or steal from anybody or anything like that. The only mistake on the entire bill was the misspelling of Washington in Washington, D.C. on the seal. and it's just, this is a really cute story. The old counterfeiter is played by Edmund Gwenn, who was nominated in Mr. 880 for a Best Supporting Actor role, nomination for the award, I should say. And you may know Gwen from his Oscar-winning role as Santa Claus in 1947's holiday classic Miracle on 34th Street. Burt Lancaster plays the frustrated Secret Service agent, and he's on Mr. 880's tail. And Dorothy McGuire is Lancaster's love interest, and also she's a link between the two men. This is a delightful film. Look for it. It seems like something that TCM would show, so put that on your radar. I highly recommend that. And that brings us to number one, and the number one film screened here at Cinema Wellman for the month of November was titled Prater. And Prater was a documentary, 5 out of the 10 films, documentaries in November. And when I watched Prater, I sometimes had really no idea what I was looking at. It's a documentary about the world's oldest amusement park in Vienna, Austria. And it's part historical retrospective. It's part watching regular people just enjoying the park's rides and amusements and attractions. And it's also part kind of head-scratching lunacy. While I was watching this, I took close to a half dozen short films with my phone, and I'm just like sending them to friends and family. And the responses were mostly, "What the hell are you watching?" And the other response that I got a lot was, no, thank you. It reminded me a lot of the documentary Coney Island from earlier this summer, and I really liked that if you watch that episode. There were similarities between what was going on in Prater and what was going on at Coney Island later. It's because it seems that Prater was kind of the groundbreaker, and it started up all this stuff, and it became the goal for an amusement park was to have the stuff that was available at Prater. They had the first silent movie theater in the world in 1905. So they were setting trends for others to follow. Not all of them good trends, because, like Coney Island, there were human zoos where foreign peoples were put on display in their natural habitats, and that's a yikes. There was a ride that the only purpose it seemed to be was to turn women upside down so their skirts would go over their heads so you could see if they were wearing undergarments or not. There's an also dubbed as a double yikes for that one. There were freak shows, there were super dangerous rides, there were puppets. So there were so many freaking puppets in this movie. There were clowns, and there were clown puppets, and there were marionettes doing the St. Vitus dance. Oh, puppets! There was a monkey puppet smoking a real cigarette. It was nightmare fuel, but it was a great time at the same time. One of my favorite sequences, you see those punching bags? It's a big oversized punching bag at a boardwalk or an amusement center, and you punch it, and then you have to reset it, and you punch it again. So one of my favorite sequences in Prater involves one of those machines. They show a guy hitting that bag over and over and over. There's no music, it's just natural sound. There is no narration. It's this one dude, and he keeps hitting the bag over and over and resetting it. And then he resets it, and then he kicks it. And then he resets it and he punches it. And then he resets it and goes to the other side and he punches it. And this goes on for almost a minute. And the very almost last one, he resets it, goes out of frame, comes running in, and slams into it with his head and headbutts it. That's kind of it. I mean, that's the best way to describe what this was. They have interviews with people who visited as a kid, and one of my favorites was this elderly gentleman that they were interviewing, and he tells a story about being on a ride at Prater, and he said that it felt like the ride was coming apart and it was collapsing. He thought that the entire park was being demolished and destroyed, and that he was going to die. I mean, you can't beat that. What a great memory to have as a kid. Or wait, or is it? He seemed like he was okay about it. Even the song playing over the closing credits is this old timey tune with the calliope kind of bass, and the lyric was "Merry-go-rounds are lovely." This was gold. Prater, see it if you can. Talk about seeing, and that's it for this month. But talk about seeing. If you go on the website and on the blog, it's cinemawellman.com. You'll see, the write up of all these films and all the movie posters and all that stuff. But of course, I always have the platforms. And if you want to watch any of these for any reason, good or bad, I list where you can find those films. And again, that's it for this little wrap up of November. Our next episode is, as I mentioned, as I teased, it's going to be available this coming Sunday morning, and it's a special World Cup episode. It's the World Cup of Cinema with Cinema Wellman. And that's it from here. Until next time.